Everyone loves dogs. They're cute, innocent, and they all have their own individual personalities. Not only have dogs been at man's side for over 30,000 years, they've also been used for many jobs during that time. Some are used to herd, hunt, protect, haul, and some are used to teach us when breeding goes just a little too far. Sorry, pugs. With so many different types of dogs being capable of so many different types of things, there is one specific thing that all dogs are great at, and that one thing is entertainment. While all dogs are capable of providing a lifetime of entertainment simply just by existing, there are some whose sole purpose in life is to entertain millions of people on the silver screen. And today, I want to tell you about some of the most important good boys and good girls in cinema's history, and what I call a barkumentary, the history of dogs in movies. And why am I, of all people, qualified to tell you about this? Well, it's because it just so happens that I too happen to have that dog in me. Our history of dogs in cinema begins all the way back in 1905, when a British man named Cecil Hepworth produced a film called Rescued by Rover, an under 7-minute story of a baby being kidnapped and her dog, whose name is Rover, rescuing her, which actually, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, is the cheapest film to ever be produced at just $37.40, which is about $1,326 today. One of the reasons it was so cheap was because Hepworth used members of his own family to be in it, including the film's 2 stars. The baby in the film was played by his 8-month-old daughter named Barbara, and of course the real star of the film, the family dog, was a collie named Blair. Oh, look at the puppy. Oh my goodness, she's so cute. I've never seen a cuter dog in my entire life. Oh, except for you, Peaches. This film was very popular in its day. So popular, in fact, that the original negatives of the film wore out. And they wore out because there were so many copies of it made. So Hepworth had to remake the film again shot for shot, which means that he had to go back and film everything the exact same way as the first time so that everything matched. So he had to film everything all over again so he can get a new set of negatives so that those negatives can have more copies made. So needless to say, this film was a very big success. Sorry, hold on, it seems like I'm getting a call. 1 second, sorry about that. Julian Productions, this is Julian speaking, how can I help you? Yeah. Oh, those negatives were out too. Okay. Okay, so he had to shoot it again? Yeah. Yeah, shot for shot, right? Okay, so he shot it 3 times. Okay, cool. Cool. Okay, I'll update the script, thanks, I appreciate it. Hey, I can't really talk right now, I'm in the middle of filming, can I call? No, Mom, I do love you, I just don't. Yes, of course I want the dino nuggets. What are you talking about? What kind of question is that? Hold on, I gotta take. Mom, I told you that I only want the dino ones with barbecue. Ow! Needless to say, this film was a huge success, and as a result of that success, it made Hepworth a very rich man, which ultimately gave him the opportunity to keep making more and more films. Blair would actually end up starring in many of Hepworth's films. I couldn't exactly find out when it happened, but when Blair did eventually end up passing away, Hepworth's company put out a newsletter saying, "The Hepworth Manufacturing Company has just suffered quite a severe loss in the death of their famous old dog Rover. This faithful animal had been Mr. Hepworth's consistent companion even before the Hepworth Company had been founded, and was the general pet of the studio." So you can tell that this dog was a really important figure in not just Hepworth's company but in the general public as well. 5 years later in 1910, the next famous movie dog starred in her very first film in New York City. Her name was Jean, and she was a tri-colored Scotch collie from Maine. Here's some footage from her first ever film. Oh yeah, that's right. I actually can't show you footage from her first film. And that's because this film is lost, and no evidence of it actually exists. Which actually isn't all that uncommon for older movies, believe it or not. Lots of early films, and even somewhat historic early films, are lost with no footage of them actually existing. Sometimes, however, pieces of those old films can pop up unexpectedly from time to time. Did I say that word right? Unexpectedly. Sometimes, however, pieces of those old films can pop up unexpectedly from time to time. Like for example, the 1917 film Cleopatra starring Theda Bara. This film, along with, unfortunately, most of Bara's films, were tragically destroyed in the infamous 1937 Fawkes Fault Fire. However, recently, 41 seconds of this film was found and released, after collector James Fennell bought a 1920s toy film projector and this footage just so happened to be inside of it. So maybe one day someone might buy your great-great-grandfather's footlocker from 1910 and find footage of Jean in her breakout role in there. Just make sure you don't accidentally open the one labeled Grandma Jean's Wild Adventure, unless you want to see her in her breakout role, if you know what I mean. Jean the dog was hugely popular in early films, as she starred in over 25 of them from 1910 to 1916. She was so famous that her image was put on things like posters and postcards. One time a film fan magazine named Moving Picture World actually reported on when she gave birth to 6 puppies. Damn paparazzi. They have no respect for privacy. How Jean ended up becoming so popular is actually one of the original kind of classic Hollywood stories. She just so happened to be at the right place at the right time. Well, I mean, at least her owner was. Lawrence Trimble was working in New York City as a writer who wrote for different publications, when he was sent to Vitagraph Film Studios in Brooklyn to write a story about movie making. While he was there, an actress named Florence Turner was shooting a movie with a dog, but was having a really hard time doing so because the dog wouldn't follow the director's instructions. Wow. A dog not listening, huh? Can't imagine that. Trimble mentioned to the director that he actually had a dog that could do everything they needed a dog to do in the film. The next day he brought Jean to set, and once the studio head saw what she could do, they offered her a contract right on the spot. And to make sure that they can get her, they threw in a screenwriting contract for Trimble as well. Unfortunately, most of Jean's films are lost and no longer exist. But the second film that she starred in, at least I think it's the second film based off the research I've done, actually still survives. Remember how I mentioned that old films can randomly be found sometimes? Well, that's exactly what happened to this one. This film, named Jean the Matchmaker, was actually found in 2010 in a place called Hobbiton. Oh, sorry, apparently this place is actually called New Zealand. I don't know if that's legal or not. But finding it there should show you just how far Jean's films did reach. This film is now permanently preserved by the Library of Congress and the National Film Preservation Foundation. Jean eventually passed away in 1916 at the age of 14. Jean's films were so popular in her lifetime that she was apparently earning her owner approximately $1,568 a week, which in modern day is about $50,000. Damn. I wish I had a dog that earned me 50 grand a week. In September of 1918, during World War I, the Allies broke through the German line in northeastern France.
While the Germans evacuated, soldiers were sent to observe the area to see what remained.
Among those men was Corporal Lee Duncan, who discovered a mother dog and her puppies, left behind in an old damaged war dog station. Unable to consciously leave the dogs behind, he and a friend took the dogs back to base and cared for them. Once the puppies no longer required nursing, Duncan picked a male and a female puppy from the litter and kept them for himself. The other 3 puppies were given to fellow soldiers, and one of his officers actually asked for the mother. He then named the dogs Rin Tin Tin and Nanette. He named them after 2 small good luck charm dolls that the French children had given his unit during the war. This is Duncan's unit, and if you look closely you can see a little Rin Tin Tin. That's gotta be the second coolest military animal photo ever taken. Oh, you want to know what the first one is? After the war, Duncan was able to bring both dogs aboard a ship to New York City, where he left the dogs with a woman that raised German Shepherds, until he could return and bring them back home with him to California. Unfortunately, Nanette got sick aboard the ship, and despite good care from the woman watching her, she sadly ultimately passed away in July of 1919. When Duncan came to pick up the dogs, the woman, who was a breeder of German Shepherds, gave him a replacement dog from one of her litters, which he ended up naming Nanette too. I'm glad he chose that name too, because the breeder was just calling her Oopsie the whole time. It's really awkward. Yeah, I deserve that. That was a bad joke. Once he was home again, Duncan returned to his pre-war job at a sporting goods store. He then used his experience training hunting dogs and his connections at the store to train and enter Rinty into dog shows. In one of the shows, there was actually a challenge to see which dog could scale the highest wall. Rinty ended up winning after scaling a wall that was 11 feet 9 inches tall, or 3.58 meters. After winning some shows, Duncan had the idea that his dog might be able to do really good in this whole new motion picture thing that everybody was talking about. So he did what lots of people seeking movie fame in Los Angeles do. He made his dog start an OnlyFans. Sorry, I've got my notes mixed up. That's what people in the 2020s do, not the 1920s. Silly me. In the 1920s, people would go door to door visiting smaller film studios on Gower Street in Los Angeles, trying to get casted in roles or just get jobs on film sets. And one day, unlike my OnlyFans, he was successful. As one day the director from a film called The Man from Hell's River couldn't get what he wanted from a wolf. So Warner Brothers then called Duncan to let him know that they were giving him a shot. And while he obviously took the opportunity, Duncan realized that the director was expecting a wolf and not a good boy. So thinking fast, Duncan literally rubbed dirt all over Rinty to cover his very obvious German Shepherd markings. And as a result of that, Rinty actually got his first official movie role. In 1923, Warner Brothers signed Rin Tin Tin, the dog, not the wolf, to a contract. This contract earned Duncan $1,000 a week, or $18,456 in today's money. And the studio had Rinty insured for $10,000 or $184,564 today. Along with being driven to the studio every day, Rinty actually had a collar with diamonds in it, which Duncan would actually cover with a blanket every time they entered or exited a car. Damn, Rinty! Hey, can I borrow $1? Because the new types of films called talkies, which now had audio for dialogues in film, lots of once successful actors in the silent era had a really hard time making the transition to talkies. And unfortunately, Rin Tin Tin was one of them. Rin Tin Tin made 26 films for Warner Brothers, with his last being 1930's Rough Waters, which shortly after its release, Warner Brothers released Rinty from his contract. In 1932, Rin Tin Tin passed away due to old age. His death was such a big deal in the US that radio programming was interrupted just to announce it, and a 1-hour special aired later that week just to honor him. To put that into perspective for you for modern day, imagine a video interrupting your TikTok toilet time just to let you know that Stuart Little just died. Wait a minute, is TikTok even still around while you're watching this? Let me know in the comments. Although Rinty was a huge star, his owner Lee Duncan had fallen on hard times in the 30s due to the Great Depression, so he could only afford to bury Rinty in a casket in his backyard. However, not long after burying Rinty, Duncan had to sell his house. So he arranged for Rinty to be sent to Paris to be reburied in the famous pet cemetery. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm gonna say this terribly, but I'm gonna at least try. Cimetière des Chiens et Autres Animaux Domestiques. Yep, no way I said that right. Although gone, his legacy did continue in a TV show called The Adventures of Rin Tin Tin that lasted 164 episodes from 1954 to 1959, which actually starred one of Rinty's offspring named Rin Tin Tin IV, until he was replaced by another German Shepherd named Flame. You'll never replace him. You'll never be Rinty. To just show you again how big of a deal this dog was in Hollywood, in 1960 Rin Tin Tin was honored with his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So if you're ever walking in Hollywood and see this, just remember to tell whoever you're with that that dog had a very successful OnlyFans. Now I know many of you have probably never heard of Blair, Jean, or even Rin Tin Tin before I just told you about them. And I think that because, well, before writing this, I had never even heard of them either. However, I am positive that you have either heard of, seen, or maybe even be a fan of all the dogs that I mentioned from this point out on this list. Starting off with the purebred Cairn Terrier born in 1933, in Altadena, California named Terry. Terry got her name from a married couple that took her in as a pet. As a puppy, Terry had a problem with peeing on the carpet, and her owners didn't really want to deal with it themselves. So they ended up sending her to a training school ran by a man named Carl Spitz. Spitz was a third-generation dog trainer that had about 10 acres of property. It was basically a 5-star dog hotel. While training regular pet dogs, he also trained dogs for military and police use, but he was most successful at training movie dogs. At one point, 75 different movie dogs had once lived there. After a few weeks of training, Terry no longer had the problem of peeing on the carpet. However, by the time Terry was done with the training, her owners were late on their payments. Spitz tried to continually contact him, but he never could, and eventually their phone was disconnected, which ultimately left Terry without a home.
I'm not paying for those.
So by his wife's suggestion, they ended up keeping Terry as a pet. Unlike Spitz's other dogs, Terry was never meant to be an actor, she was just the family's dog. But that all changed one day when actor Clark Gable stopped by the kennel to take some pictures with one of the other dogs named Buck. Buck had a role in Gable's next film called Call of the Wild, so he stopped by and visited so he can get some publicity on the film. It turns out Terry had picked up a lot while watching the other dogs and living with the family because she made herself very known to Gable while he was there. Ooh, sounds like Terry's got a crush to me. Seeing what Terry was capable of, Spitz took her to Fox Studios the very next day to audition for a part in the new Shirley Temple movie. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Shirley Temple, allow me to give you some of her stats. Still unsure who she is? Maybe this will ring some bells.
Animal crackers in my soup, monkeys and rabbits loop-the-loop.
3 Shirley Temple.
Make it stop! No, I can't take it anymore, please! Stop! Make it stop! After showing the Fox executives what she could do, Terry was given to Shirley for the final approval, which consisted of Terry being put next to Shirley's personal dog named Ching Ching. That name's gotta be racist, right? Anyways, the two dogs ended up running around the dressing room playing together. And because of that, Terry got her very first role in 1934's Bright Eyes. Terry ended up in 5 more films before landing the most famous role of her entire career in 1938, and that role was as the dog Toto in The Wizard of Oz. Terry received a weekly salary of $125 a week, which is actually more than the actors that were playing the Munchkins were getting paid. Terry was absolutely loved and adored by the entire cast and crew of the movie. Before filming began, she even went to go live with the star of the film, Judy Garland, for 2 weeks. Garland loved her so much that she tried to buy Terry from Spitz, which he ultimately declined. Even though the production of Wizard of Oz was, how can I put this? Oh yeah, a shit show for everyone involved. The rest of Terry's time on set actually went pretty smoothly. Well, except for the one incident where one of the actors that played one of the Winkies, these guys, ended up stepping on her paw. Listen here, you green Because of her role as Toto, Terry became extremely famous. So famous in fact that her paw print became super valuable and very sought after by autograph seekers. Also because of her popularity, Spitz officially changed her name from Terry to Toto. Toto went on to star in a total of 23 films before she retired in 1942. And 2 years later in 1944, she sadly passed away. She was buried at home at the original Hollywood Dog Training School. Okay, what I'm about to say next might get you kinda sad, so I'm sorry. Around 1958, the Ventura Freeway was being built and it went right through Spitz's school, meaning that, unfortunately, it also went right through Toto's grave. However, a memorial statue was placed in the famous Hollywood Forever Cemetery to honor the late Toto. I hate you, Ventura Freeway. I hate you. You know what else I hate? Not being sponsored. You heard me right. This video is not sponsored, because if it was, there'd be an ad right here, but there's not. But you can help me eventually get there by subscribing to this channel, as well as liking this video and sharing it to your friends. I would really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for your support. Okay, let's get back to the video. Okay, back in character. In 1940, a man named Rudd Weatherwax, that is an awesome name by the way, and his brother Frank had just opened their very own movie dog training school. One day, a man who was having trouble with his new puppy, who chased motorcycles, chewed everything up, barked all the time, and couldn't be housebroken, brought his dog to Rudd's school so that he could train him. Rudd accepted the job to train the dog for a week and charged the man $10. After the man accepted, Rudd now had the responsibility of training an 8-month-old rough collie named Pal. After the week was over, the man came back to a much better behaved and better trained Pal. However, he still did chase motorcycles, but hey, that's not bad for only a week. When Rudd was getting ready to return Pal to his owner and collect his $10, the owner told him how he and his wife were so much happier now with how quiet and peaceful their house was. So he offered to leave the dog with Rudd instead of paying him his $10. Rudd actually agreed, so now he became the new owner of Pal. Although Rudd and Frank had over 40 dogs that they were training to be in the movies, Pal was never one of them. Since there was no casting calls for rough collies, Pal was instead just the family's pet, and he was more than happy doing so. Rudd had a son named Bob who loved to roam the property as a kid, so Rudd trained Pal to go find Bob whenever he'd roam around. Pal would find him, gently take his arm, and then lead him all the way home when it was time for dinner. When Pal was about 1.5 years old, one of the family's neighbors stopped by on the way to his ranch, and asked if he could take Pal with him for a couple days. Rudd agreed, and Pal ended up going on vacation. I wish someone would take you to a ranch for a couple days. A couple days after Pal was gone, Rudd ended up finding an ad saying that MGM was holding auditions for a collie to be the star of an upcoming role. Thinking that this was the only opportunity he would probably ever have to get Pal on screen, he rushed to his neighbor's ranch to pick up Pal. Once he saw Pal, I think he quickly realized that Pal was having a really great time, because his fur was matted, tangled, and filled with a bunch of brush and sticks. Rudd put him in the car, took him home, bathed him, and cleaned him up the best that he could, even having to cut some of Pal's fur since things were just so tangled in it. On the day of the audition, Pal didn't really look his best, especially compared to the 300 other dogs that were also auditioning that day. In fact, Pal didn't even make it past the first cut. The MGM executives eventually casted a collie from San Francisco for the role. However, when the dog came in for a screen test in the studio, the dog was terrified by all the lights and the chaos of set. Why would he be terrified? The lights aren't even that bad. I'm sweating so bad right now. So MGM sent that dog home and kept looking for another one. 6 months later, Powell looked his absolute best again, and Rudd took him to the studio where he was able to speak with the film's director, Fred M. Wilcox. Oh, why are his eyes following me? Wilcox liked Powell so much that he set up a screen test for him the next day, and Powell impressed the executives so much that they had him put paw to paper, and began work on his first film, Lassie Come Home, in 1943. I know you're probably shocked to know that Lassie was played by a male dog, and actually I was too upon finding out, but you gotta realize the studio did do this for a reason. You see, female collies periodically shed their coats, which means that their appearance can change. Male collies are also larger, which means that children can look smaller when they're sitting next to Lassie, as they themselves will continue to grow throughout them filming. Kids grow up fast, so you want a dog that will make them look as small as possible for as long as possible. Because of the success of the first film, MGM made 6 more films starring Powell as Lassie. After Powell's 4th film, Rudd was offered a chance to do a weekly Lassie radio show called The Lassie Show.
From Hollywood, Lassie! Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the world's most famous dog, Lassie, in person.
Where Powell would be there live providing all the lines in the script that he needed to. He'd bark, whine, growl, basically any noise that a dog could do, he'd be there doing for the show. Because Powell was actually still filming movies at this time, Rudd bought a private plane to have Powell travel from set to Hollywood to record his radio show. Damn, this is the second time this video I felt more broke than a dog. Maybe my mom's right, maybe I do need a job. Powell was so famous that one time while making a public appearance, he was surrounded by kids, and Rudd had to step away for a second. When he came back, he saw one of the kids had pulled out a pair of scissors and was cutting Powell's fur. When Rudd confronted the kid, he replied, "Shucks, Mr. Weatherwax, I know where I can trade 1 lock of Lassie's fur for 3 autographed pictures of Lana Turner. Listen here, you little sh**." In 1951, MGM decided that it was time to move on from Lassie, but they didn't want to pay $40,000 to buy Rudd and Powell out of their contract. So they worked out a deal where Rudd would receive the rights to Lassie's name and the trademark. In 1954, 2 pilot episodes were filmed for the new Lassie TV show called Lassie. Powell starred in both of these episodes. However, once the show was approved for an actual season, Powell was a little too old to play Lassie, so Lassie Jr. stepped in and filled in the role. Powell still came to set with Rudd every day though, where he had his own dog bed that he'd lay in while they shot the show. Unfortunately, in June of 1958, Powell, aka Lassie, passed away at the age of 18. He was buried on the family's ranch, and Rudd would visit his grave often. According to his son, Rudd actually fell into a deep depression once Powell passed away, and also couldn't bring himself to watch any MGM Lassie movies because he just couldn't bear to see Powell again. It's safe to say that Rudd loved and cared for his best friend very deeply. Lassie is actually still played by descendants of Powell, which is awesome to know that his legacy still carries on through his bloodline. Alright Peaches, we made it. It's time to move on to your favorite dog next. No. No. Yeah, Air Bud. Wait, you know Snoop Dogg? I know everyone watching this has heard of Air Bud, and most of you have probably even seen one of his movies. I mean, even Peaches has seen one. In 1989, a man named Kevin DeChico found a disheveled, messy dog roaming near a mine shaft in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And as I feel like anybody really would, Kevin took him in and adopted him, naming him Buddy. Kevin spent 6 years training Buddy how to play sports. He taught him things like how to catch a baseball pitch, how to block a hockey shot, as well as how to catch a football. But the one sport that Buddy was most talented in was basketball, a talent that would eventually find him massive success. He found himself on shows like America's Funniest Home Videos. He even played Comet on the show Full House for one episode, where he got to use his talents to embarrass Uncle Jesse.
Have mercy.
He also found himself on bigger stages like Late Night with David Letterman. He was also showing off his talents at things like halftime shows, for sports like basketball and football. In 1997, Buddy eventually landed the role that we all know and love him for in the movie Air Bud. Buddy received a deal from Disney that turned into 12 films that lasted over 15 years. However, sadly, Buddy would never get to see the joy and memories that he brought kids for generations to come. Because during the filming of the original Air Bud movie, Buddy developed a lump on his leg which caused him to limp. After the movie was finished filming, it was found that the lump on Buddy's leg was cancerous. And the decision was ultimately made to amputate the leg because it would save Buddy's life. And according to Kevin, although Buddy was a leg down, he was still able to play all of his favorite sports. Sadly, Buddy did end up passing away from cancer in his sleep on February 10th, 1998. He was ultimately estimated to be around 9 or 10 years old when he passed away, but no one really knows for sure because Kevin did find him as a stray. Fortunately, Buddy did have kids and Kevin ended up training them too. Some of his kids were actually some of the puppies in the Air Bud sequels. However, unfortunately, due to the end of the Air Bud franchise along with the COVID-19 pandemic, Kevin has found himself falling on hard times.
In very poor health and living in homeless shelters, a GoFundMe was set up in late 2024 to help raise money for Kevin. Almost $20,000 has been raised. And in November of 2024, Kevin updated the page saying thank you to all those who have donated. And that thanks to all of them, he was able to find temporary housing and that his mental health has been a lot better as a result. The GoFundMe has a goal of $200,000 to help Kevin find permanent housing and get the medical help that he needs. Hey everybody, so I'm filming this after filming the main portion of the video that you're watching. I'm actually in the middle of editing it right now, but I'm here to tell you that there has been an update about Kevin. I'm filming this in February, and as of a couple weeks ago, he actually did post an update to the GoFundMe. In the update, he talks about after the holidays, he was excited to be 6 months without a hospital visit. However, a flare-up happened and he ended up spending 12 days in the hospital. And while he's still working hard to be positive and remain focused, he will be starting a new rehab to help his breathing soon. Once again, he thanked everybody that has donated and how all that has helped him so far. And I know in the video I mentioned that there was a $200,000 goal for the GoFundMe, but it seems like he has lowered that. He talked about the $200,000 goal might have scared people off from donating because it was such a big gap. So he did lower it from $200,000 to $50,000. Although he may not be able to reach the $200,000 goal, he is closer to hitting the $50,000 goal. The link for Kevin's GoFundMe is the first link in the description below. I'm also going to try to do the pinned comment on the bottom. I don't know if I can do that yet, but I'm going to try it. But yeah, the link is in the description if you want to spread awareness or if you are able to and in the position to donate. I just want to say, Kevin, thank you so much for all the memories you've given us with Airbud, and get well soon. We are all pushing for you. Good luck, man. One of my favorite things about owning a dog is that there really are no rules when it comes to naming them. There are no laws saying that I can't name my dog Frank or Mr. Kitty or Chris for short. Come to think of it, I think there was a dog named Chris that started in a movie franchise. His name was just Chris though, not. Teresa Ann Miller is a dog trainer who'd previously trained animals for TV shows and movies like Lethal Weapon. She ended up buying a dog from a breeder. But Hollywood didn't really think that that specific breed of dog that Teresa got could make a good movie dog. See, a dog actor needs to be a couple things. They need to be really good at listening. They need to have high energy to be able to act and participate on screen. They need to fit a specific role so that they could do their job well. But the dog that she got wasn't known for any of that. It was known for being lazy and drooling all over the place and weighing over 160 pounds, or 72.5 kilo. You see, Teresa didn't get just any average dog. Teresa got a St. Bernard. Specifically, this St. Bernard named Chris, who you might know better as Beethoven. Originally set to star a Golden Retriever, but ultimately changed to be a St. Bernard, the movie Beethoven auditioned over 20 different giant slobber machines before landing on Chris, who ultimately was chosen to star in the film. Chris was apparently really difficult to train because he was pretty lazy. Me too, Chris. Me too. But ultimately, his eagerness to please made him really good at his job. Chris was very friendly and calm, and people loved him on set. So much so that they apparently all gave him a nickname, and on set, his nickname was Ham. He was also, according to his trainer, wasn't aware that he weighed as much as he did and didn't think he was as big as he was, because he, and I quote, often wanted to sit as close as possible and sometimes on top of you. Chris starred in the original Beethoven movie and its direct sequel in 1993. After filming the original two movies, Chris retired and spent the rest of his life at home as a much-loved family pet. In 2007, Chris passed away at the age of 12. That's 5, and then it's the PEMDAs, and then just a 7, and then if you add it, and then if you... 84 in human years. Although there are many more canine actors out there, I think the ones I mentioned today have not only left their marks on generations of moviegoers, but also left legacies in movies' history, pop culture, and society. I, along with many, patiently await the future of dogs in film. From live-action sad movies to fully CGI super dogs, the future is bright for our favorite fur babies in film. Who is your favorite movie dog? Should I have mentioned any other talented four-legged actors? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and as always, don't forget, you matter, you're loved, and if no one's told you today, I love you. Or, in this case, I wolf you.
I wolf you too.
See you next time. What's up, Peachy Baby? Oh, that's the microphone. You just want to start in this whole thing, don't you? $126 today. Oh my goodness, that scared the shit out of me. No evidence of it exists. There's dog hair flying everywhere. So by his wife's suggestion, they also...